The topic today is regulation of internal environment. We've looked at some organs involved in homeostasis. Those organs are responsible for regulation of internal environment. Today we are looking at the skin, an organ of homeostasis. Skin is the largest organ which covers the entire outer surface of the body. You can touch your skin, and the skin has two parts. It's made up of the epidermis and the dermis. The epidermis is the outermost layer of the skin, the one that you can touch, the one you can see, the one that you can be able to say this is the color of the skin. The inner one is called the dermis. What are your experience? What organ of the human body Now let's look at your experience. What organ of the human body carries out excretion and also protects it? If you were on a live recording or live lesson, virtual lesson, you would have been able to give me a response. The answer to that question is skin. How often do you take your bath and why? What do you do next after having your bath? Now you take your bath maybe once or twice or 3 times based on your different belief or reasons. But the recommended number of times is to take your bath twice daily before going to bed and first thing in the morning. So let's look at what are we supposed to learn under the skin as an organ of homeostasis. By the end of this virtual lesson, you as the student should be able to draw a label diagram of the longitudinal section of mammalian skin. State and explain the functions of the skin. Name the diseases of the skin. And then finally state ways to care for the skin. So let's move on. This is the structure of the skin. So internally, this is a longitudinal section of the skin. You can see the air of your skin and you can see the epidermis. Now the epidermis is made up of three layers. Just give me a minute. I want to get a pen. Okay, you have the granular layer, which is the outermost part of the epidermis. The conified or horny layer, which is the outermost part of the epidermis. Then you have the middle granular layer. Immediately following the middle granular layer, you have the innermost layer of the epidermis, which is called the Myopigan Layer. Now, it is important to know that the Myopigan layer is a layer of the epidermis that is closest to the dermis. This is the part of the epidermis where cells are actively dividing and producing new cells. It's at this layer of the epidermis that you have the pigment called melanin, which is responsible for the skin coloration. Now, the part next to the Myopigan layer is the dermis. Before I talk about the dermis, let me go back a little bit and talk about the granular layer, which is the innermost layer of the epidermis. It's also made up of a living cell like that of the Myopigan. So the cells of the Myopigan layer is constantly being pushed up to the to the granular layer. When the cells, remember the cells of any living organism go out, get worn out, and then they are replaced. So when the cell dies, it's being pushed up to the outermost conified or awning layer. And as the dead cells begin to pick up the pigment called keratin, it gives the skin its toughness, it gives the skin its flexibility, and it also makes give the skin its glow. You don't even need to use any cream or body lotion. If you take good meal, good diet, it will show on the skin. Now let's quickly talk about the dermis. The dermis consists of blood capillaries, as you can see on the screen, the hair follicle, the sweat glands, the sebaceous gland, the sensory nerve endings, the receptors, the adipose cells, which is also called the fats. Now from this diagram, you can see everything I'm talking about: the skin, the epidermis, the dermis, and the epidermis made up of the granular, the conified, the granular, and the Myopigan. In this diagram, the stratum corneum is the name given to the conified layer, and the spinous cell layer is the one that is called Myopigan. Now you can see the sweat gland, that's where sweat is being produced, and it passes through the sweat ducts and comes out on the granular layer of the epidermis as sweat pore. Then you can see the hair follicle. The hair follicle, which has hair erector muscle attached to it. The construction and realization of the hair erector muscle, bring about stimulates the hair follicle. So that's why you have the hair stands and the hair bends during when you have weather changes, like during weather different, when the weather is cold, when the weather is whether the weather is hot. We will talk that more under the sensation of the skin, but we're looking at the skin as an organ of homeostasis. So having looked at this structure, you are expected to draw this diagram in your note and show all this basic organ structure of the skin. So what are the functions of the skin? The major and number one function of the skin is protection. The conified layer helps prevent the intrusion of any potential harmful microorganisms or pathogens into the living tissue beneath. So the skin functions as an organ of protection. Now you have another function called the temperature control. The body loses excess heat. So, and when the external temperature is too hot, and through the following processes, the body loses heat. When the body loses excess heat, when the temperature outside it is too hot, and these processes explain what happens. We have what we call vasodilation. What does that mean? Vasodilation occurs when the air shaft is lowered and then you sweat. That's what happens when there is heat. You sweat a lot, and then that means the sweat gland is at work, it produces more sweat, and then the strand of the air is at a slant position. It is being lowered. The body retains heat when the external temperature is very cold through the following processes. The processes are vasoconstriction, and this is what happened when there is vasoconstriction. The air shaft is raised, stands erect. Then you have sweating. shivering. Sorry, you have shivering. You have less sweating during that period. So that's what happened when the weather is very cold. It also happened when we have feverish condition. All this shivering. So those are the functions of the skin: protection function, temperature control. That means it regulates the temperature when the weather is hot, when the weather is cold. The skin responds to these changes in the environment. And all the functions of the kidney: excretory function, excretion of sweat, sensitivity. It's sensitive to touch, it's sensitive to pain, it's sensitive to pressure, sensitive to even heat and cold. Then one of the other functions of the skin: storage of food. Storage of food, like fat is a source of food, is a class of food, and this organ skin is known to store fat. Production of milk. You know that the mammary gland, which is commonly called the breast, is an extension of the skin, and it is richly there is higher concentration of fats, adipose tissue in the mammary gland, and vitamin D is also present in the skin. What are the diseases of skin? Mostly the diseases of skins are caused by viruses, a fungus, or as a result of a weak immune system. So when your immunity is very low, you can show symptoms of skin infection. Other examples of diseases caused by either viruses or fungi, plural. You have eczema. I will mention the one that are common. You have athlete's foot. You have ringworm of the foot. You have cold sores. You have fever blisters. You have acne. You have shingles. You have hives. You have leprosy. Leprosy is a disease of the skin, to mention but a few. How do you care for your skin? Regular cleaning of your skin. And when we say regular cleaning of your skin, what do we mean? We mean having your bath twice daily with soap and water. Exposure to fresh air. You need to stay where there are fresh air to keep your skin. That's one of the care of the skin. Eating balanced diet. Having regular exercise and dressing of wounds. Now let's quickly go to the next topic, which is sense organs. Sense organs. What are sense organs? What are sense organs? Sense organs are organs which contain sensory cells or sensory receptors. And what are sensory receptors? Sensory receptors are specialized cells which are able to detect a particular type of stimuli. They're able to detect a particular type of stimuli, and the type of stimuli they dictate, we have chemoreceptors. So they are able to dictate stimuli like mechanical, chemical, thermal, or electromagnetic stimuli. And you know what that means. Stimuli is any changes in the environment. So sense organs are able to sense touch, taste, smell, sight, and hearing. Sense organs act as the receptors of these sensations that I've just mentioned: sensation of touch, sensation of smell, sensation of taste, sensation of perception. So if you are told to mention the major 5 sense organs that you know, the nose, the tongue, the eyes, the ears, and the skin. So what are your experiences? What do you know before? What organs of the body helps with perception of smell? And what organs helps you to detect the taste of food? I believe the organs of the body helps with perception of smell is what? The nose. The nose. And the one that is responsible for detecting the taste of food is what? The tongue. Has anyone around you farted before? I guess so, a lot of times in the class. How did you know someone has farted? How does apple fruit taste? And how did you get to know the taste? So I know you have various responses, which we will look into when we meet physically on site. So let's move on. What organ of the body is responsible for detecting changes in the environment? What organ of the body is responsible for detecting changes in the environment? Have you sweated before? How did you know if the weather is cold or not? If you are thinking alongside with me, I believe out of the sense organs that we have, the sense organ that qualify as the answer to this question is no other but the skin. But for the purpose of this lesson, we'll be looking at just 3 sense organs. The organs of taste, the organs of smell, and the organs of perception. So at the end of this lesson, you as a student should be able to list the major sense organs and in fact their location. You should be able to describe the organ of smell, taste. Describe organ of smell and taste, and you should be able to identify part of the tongue associated with sweetness, bitterness, salty, and sour taste. And you should be able to draw the skin showing these different receptors present. The tongue is the organ of taste. The tongue is a part of the nose. The tongue is the organ of taste and contains chemoreceptor for the different tastes. The tongue is able to detect 4 different tastes: sour, sweet, salty, and bitter. If you look at the diagram, you will see what we call the taste buds. You will see this taste bud when you look at your tongue. It's a group of sensory cells. We call them taste chemoreceptors. They are sensory cells that are grouped on the upper surface of the tongue, on the soft palate, and in the epithelium at the back of the tongue, of the mouth. These sensory cells, these taste sensory cells, which are also called chemoreceptors, are called taste buds. So with this taste bud, because there are chemoreceptors concentrated on it, is able to detect the sensation of taste. And there are different kind of taste that the tongue is able to detect: the sour, the sweet, the salty, and bitter taste. The taste bud for bitter taste is found at the back of the tongue. The taste bud for sour is found on both sides of the tongue. That's closer to the back side of the tongue. Then that's beside. Then the taste bud for sour taste is close to the tip of the tongue, why the taste bud for sweet thing is located at the tip of the tongue. That's why when you dip out your tongue to taste the sugar, you will taste the sweetness immediately. But for instance, when you take agbojedi or bitter leaf, you find out that the bitter taste is not immediately as you take it. As a matter of fact, is at the point of swallowing that you detect the bitterness more. So all you need to know is the different areas of the tongue tasting different things. Okay, let's move on. So organ of taste, chemoreceptor, taste sensory cells, which are grouped on the upper surface of the tongue, on the soft palate, and in the epithelium at the back of the mouth. This is organ of perception. The organ of perception is the nose. Perception means smell. So the part of the nose sensitive to smell is called olfactory organs. You can see the olfactory bulb, the olfactory tract, the olfactory nerves. Then you can see where it's called the nasal cavity on the structure on the image on the screen. The olfactory organs consist of smell receptors and the mucus secreting cells. The olfactory organ is made up of sensory receptors and the mucus secreting cells. These sensory receptors and mucus secreting cells keep the surface of the olfactory organ moist. The mucus secreting cells keep the surface of the olfactory organ moist. Olfactory organs are sensory receptors, sensory neurons or receptor neurons. These neurons they are able to detect the chemicals in gaseous states. So that's the reason why if someone is cooking in the kitchen, the moment you come into the room, you will be able to sense or perceive that this person is cooking rice or this person is cooking jollof rice. Because before you can detect smell, odor, it has to go in gaseous form. And so the molecules of the odor, the smell in the air will be dissolved, diffused into the moist olfactory organ. And then stimuli is initiated, or a stimulus is initiated, and the sensory, remember the sensory cell, when we talk about the sensory neurons, the sensory neuron carry the message to the central nervous system. Then the relay is interpretation. When the brain interprets the perception, then the motor neuron bring it back, and you are able to perceive the smell. All right, we have organ of sensation. Sense organs on the skin. We have different sense organs on the skin. When I was talking about receptors, I talked about chemoreceptors, thermoreceptors, mechanoreceptors, and photoreceptors. Photoreceptors receive electromagnetic stimuli. They are found in the eyes, but we are not looking at the eye in this lesson. We are just looking at, talked about the organ of smell, organ of taste. Now we're looking at sensation of the skin. We have looked at the skin as an organ of homeostasis previously, where we talk about the structure of the skin and the function of the skin disease. Now we're looking at the skin as a sense organ. The skin is a sense organ because it contains sensory cells which can receive stimuli from the external environment and send them to the appropriate parts of the body for interpretation and action. So the nerve endings that are associated with the skin, we have the touch receptors, the pressure receptors, the pain receptors, and the thermoreceptors, which is the temperature, cold and heat. These sensory receptors in the skin are mainly dendritic endings. In the previous lesson, we learned about the neurons, and we know that we have the cell body, we have the axon, and we have the dendrites and the dendrites. So the dendritic endings of the sensory neurons are the sensory receptors in the skin. So the mechanoreceptors, a type of receptors that detect mechanical stimulus such as touch, pressure, and pain, is associated with the skin. And so there are two major receptors associated with the skin, the mechanoreceptors and the thermoreceptors. The mechanoreceptors detect mechanical stimuli such as touch. When you touch the skin, you will know. The pressure, when you put a weighty object on the skin, you will feel it. The pain, when you put something painful, have an experiment, somebody hit you with a hard object, you feel the pain because of the mechanoreceptors. Then the thermoreceptors dictate the thermal stimuli. They are the one that detects changes in the stimulus of heat and cold. So when the environment is cold or hot, the thermoreceptors of the skin helps to detect that changes in the skin. So that's all for this lesson. I'm going to drop an assignment in the WhatsApp group, and I expect everybody to do the assignment and submit tomorrow morning. Thank you.